Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to my channel. Well, with Steam Christmas sale going on, I got a few new games. One of them was Battletoads. Yeah, normally when a game reboot happens, it gets some praise, whether it's Double Dragon Neon, or River City Girls, or New Super Mario Bros. These games, when done right, usually provide new fun on a very old premise. Then there's this piece of crap called Battletoads. Where do I even begin? Now, I knew this game was released several months ago, don't get me wrong, but I ultimately forgot about it and didn't even care picking it up. With the after Christmas sale going on, I had money to choose between this and Streets of Rage, and with that game being $8 more expensive, I decided to get this one. Man, do I wish I spent $8 more for the Streets of Rage. Let's talk about Battletoads. The story and presentation of this game is probably one of the biggest mixed bags in this game of, well, mixed bags. So where do I get started? Well, it starts with the Battletoads beating up a bunch of monsters and being super popular superheroes, only to find out that they were stuck in some sort of fantasy holodeck bunker for the last 26 years, and outside of it, no one knows who or what they are. So the three get mundane jobs, until one day Rash decides the best way to get on top is to track down the Dark Queen and stop whatever nefarious schemes she must be hatching. Unfortunately, after tracking her down at an abandoned amusement park, they find out she's being held prisoner there without her powers for as long as they've been in that bunker, and it seems she knows who did this to them. Some space gods known as the Topians, so an uneasy alliance starts between her and the Battletoads as they track down the Topians to get revenge. So what is my main problem with this game? Well, first off, it tries too hard to have a narrative, and then make it a comic narrative on top of that, and it ends up failing spectacularly. Yeah, I laughed, but oftentimes for the wrong reasons, and I'm not saying that there aren't any clever lines. There were a few, mainly from Zitz, like telling Rash he isn't willing to be kidnapped again because Zitz usually was the toad that got kidnapped in the classic games, or them questioning why the game designers just have monsters appearing in front of them. Those scenes did get a real chuckle out of me, but most of the time I found myself laughing at it and not really laughing with it, or at least not the way I thought the writer intended, like, oh my god, this is so dumb, and I had to laugh at just the stupidity of it, and I don't think that was the intent for at least most of the stupid moments. They feel just dumb, and not dumb out of being clever, just dumb. And then there's just how mean-spirited this game is. In the past, you kind of got the feeling that the Battletoads may not be the smartest superheroes around, but you never saw them being idiotic jerks. The original game had a good sense to make the real mean-spirited comments come from either the Dark Queen, who was the villain in that game, or the coach. Here, all the Toads are jerks. We get them knocking out a diplomat and then surfing on his body in order to escape from a crowd. We get another joke with Rash talking about murdering and blowing up spaceships that just got in their way and ticked them off in a form of road rage.
Off some steam while we blow up these dirtbags. I'm talking about murder.
And the reason why he is also doing that is because he's actually bored. It's not funny and just plain mean-spirited. And don't get me wrong, you can be mean-spirited and still be really funny, but if you're going to go the Rick and Morty route, go all the freaking way and make this a teen-rated game or even a mature rating and then get real mean. Half-assing it just makes it seem crude for the sake of being crude, because despite the visuals that say kids show, complete with redrawn Dark Queen to make her even more kid-friendly and avoid a higher rating, you still have jokes where they say up yours and then flip the birdie to the camera, making you wonder how this game got an E10 rating in the first place.
Yours.
Ooh, spice.
It just makes the humor for the most part just seem in bad taste. And oh, since I did mention the Dark Queen a moment ago, my thought on the redesign is, it's okay. I get it, the old design had her looking more like Elvira, knockoff complete with a skimpy outfit and boobs. She was known to be one of the first female villains and quite sexy for the time, while this one has her fully dressed and due to the art style a bit of a stick figure design. But since the art style can be done cheap and the character models in this type of art style always look like stick figures, and her character is also different outside of dropping Jeffrey the Diplomat out of the airlock because he insults her, she's actually the least mean-spirited person of the group, which is kind of ironic since she's supposed to be the villain. Also the most reasonable person in the story, and the only character that didn't annoy me, so I can say I liked her the most, or should I say more like hated her the least. The new Dark Queen, washboard chest and all, is merely okay. Okay, I don't have any gripes against her. Oh, and one last complaint I do have about the game's narratives, like all really laughable bad movies and video games, it has the nerve to sequel bait! The last scene even says they have plans for the sequel before getting into Professor T-Bird's ship, and oh yeah, outside of this quick cameo at the end, knowing that if they make another game, he will be there, he's not in this game at all, which is kind of a shame. He was my favorite character in the NES game, especially the insults he threw out when you had to use a continue, and anyone who's played that game knows you had to use a lot of continues. So if they make a sequel, what would I tell the developers? Simple, the original Battletoads didn't have that much of a narrative. Dark Queen kidnaps one of the Toads and a princess. Battletoads go out to rescue the missing Toad. The humor in these games came just from the simple cutscenes explaining the next area that the Dark Queen and the Professor T-Bird would give you hints and a few insults about how you're going to die there. Yeah, there could be some mean jabs, but that didn't come from the Battletoads acting like jackasses. They came from either the Professor or the Dark Queen letting you know as the player that you suck. And that was enough humor for me. So what about the gameplay? Well, it's kind of bland at best, to be honest with you. Again, it's not terrible, just forgettable. At any rate, on single player, most of the stages for the first half will be brawlers, interrupted by a short little mini game that takes about a minute or two to get through. And the mini games include things like rock, paper, scissors, or this little one where all the Toads all get jobs. Anyways, the brawler parts work like this. In single player, you get to choose one of the 3 Toads with the ability to switch out to any other Toad on a whim by pressing the D-pad. You go around and attack enemies with X, which does light attacks, Y, which does an attack that sometimes launches the enemies in the air, and B, that does a move that transforms the Toads for a stronger finishing attacks. You can also do things like spit gum to paralyze enemies and use your tongue to snag things. It's pretty simple, but at the same time, it's not very fun. None of the enemies' designs show any real threat or even memorability. They were all forgettable. They're just random alien things for the Toads to beat on. Yeah, a few block or shock enemies appear that you do need to use a little strategy for, but they're not really memorable, and none of these designs are good. They're all pretty generic. And then you will be doing a lot of fighting during the first half of the game, because with the exception of the Turbo Bike stage, which is the 3rd stage of the game, of course, because it's always has been, the Turbo Bikes are quite a bit easier than the NES game. Granted, I only played through these parts on easy and then normal difficulty. It might be hard as hell on Battletoads difficulty. They do go super fast, and you can only take 1 hit on the higher difficulties. That said, on the lower difficulties that I was playing, it would never go too fast, and if I died on normal, the Toads would respawn at the next checkpoint, and on easy, they would respawn after about 30 seconds. I could make mistakes without huge repercussions, unlike the original where you got sent back to the original checkpoint if anybody died, and if you lost too many times, back to the beginning of the whole dang thing. While I didn't mention the fact that the game wasn't trying to break me on the 3rd stage, the 3D backdrop and the lack of challenge kept me from getting the same thrill I did playing through the original NES Turbo Bike stages. Another stage I guess I should put down, but it's basically at the point where the game does change to something that is not a brawler, is where you have to ride Jeffrey the Diplomat to escape some angry aliens that want the Toads dead for good reasons. So you ride on him and change him to different things that match the platforms by pressing the right buttons in the air. This is more like the turbo bike from the original games and the way it's viewed and the way you have to make quick reactions. And the stage actually uses a remix of the turbo bike stage's music from the original, which I thought was fitting and one of the few stages that I thought was legitimately fun and challenging. But after this part, the game starts to go even more downhill in a huge way. The third act offers no brawling. What we get is a very generic bullet shooter. Not bad by any means, but far from being memorable or doing anything new with the idea. And a very generic puzzle platformer with Pimple as he tries to solve puzzles. This goes on for about an hour of gameplay, and this episode finishes up with one of the more confusing minigames in the collection. You have to do these WarioWare-esque minigames with a set time limit, and not knowing which one is active in that order, it makes it confusing. Oh, you do get clues on top, but you still have to find the symbol which belongs to the challenge you're supposed to be completing at the time, which can be frustrating due to the lack of time you get to complete all these challenges. After that is finally over, the final stage is again for the most part not brawling. It's mostly the Queen doing the more generic action platformer thing, followed by another turbo bike sequences before the Toads fight the final boss. It really is lame. So what are my thoughts? Well, the original Battletoads did mix it up quite a bit. First stage was a brawler, sure, but the second was going down some power lines, and the third was the infamous bike stage. There were other stages added to it, but they went in circles where no stage had you do the exact same thing twice. Sure, punching things was still the majority, but not a super majority of the things you did. This is a game that is the majority of the time wants to be a brawler, at least in the first half. And it set itself up as a brawler, and then halfway through, because it wasn't a very good brawler, decides to turn itself into an unimaginative puzzle platformer and a bullet hell shooter, just for the sake of doing it. Oh, in case you wondered, if you do get game over signs, which does happen especially with the escape sequence here, no, there's no comic insults or anything. You just get these generic screens with either some, well, no durr advice on it, or an occasional joke like don't write diplomats in real life. It's just not funny. Again, killing one of the more charming things about the NES game was, again, the fact that the game was willing to insult you when you died on what is considered to be, rightfully so, the hardest NES game ever made. Well, the story and gameplay are a bit insulting and really do fall behind. On a technical aspect, Battletoads does okay. Graphically, the game looks like how I think a modern-day Battletoads game should look. These graphics are bright, the characters are over-the-top cartoony, and the environments look really weird. With the exception of, again, the enemy design being generic, the game's worlds look pretty good for what is a $20 game. And then we have these cutscenes, which are also fully animated and look like they have a decent budget despite the cheap art style. Someone was definitely trying to deliver a decent product here because there is effort. It's too bad it's got sunk in by bad writing and mediocre gameplay that it's attached to, but there is definitely some effort when it comes to the game's visuals. The only good thing I can say about this game is that the soundtrack is good. They remixed a lot of the classic NES game soundtrack, and it sounds terrific. Especially the Turbo Bike theme. I love the remixes in this. It also has some really great voice acting on top of it. Really terrible script, but some really good voice acting.
You are brothers.
I don't know. But family or not, the Battletoads never turn our backs on each other.
I did a bad thing.
Shh. You're okay, big guy.
It's okay, bro. We shouldn't have blown you off.
Yeah, but this is insane. There must be 50 bodies up here. Look at this one.
As the perpetrator of many atrocities, I suggest we consider this pile of corpses a learning experience.
It's hard for me to really tell you whether or not I hate this game or not, other than it's not worth $20. Hell, it's not even worth the $10 I paid for it. At $5, we might talk. It has terrible writing and mediocre gameplay, but at the same time, it does have a little effort put into it when it comes to the animation and music. It's bad that I can't recommend it, but not bad enough where I can really poke fun of this game or give it an angry video game style review. Just skip this one. And if you do own an Xbox One and are thinking about getting this, spend the money and get the Rare Replay collection instead if you have not already done so. It has the original NES game, and if you haven't played the original, you're missing out on playing what is the hardest NES game ever. How hard? Well, the Rare Replay gives you every dirty emulator trick in the book. Suspend saves, invincibility, unlimited lives, and even a rewind feature, and despite abusing all of those, I still couldn't beat the game. It's that hard. But due to the fact that it's easily accessible and that it has a great sense of humor, rubbing some salt in the wound on the game over screens by giving you some sick burns still makes it worth trying even today, which is more than this load of poop I just played. Man, between GeForce being an okay game and Battletoads just being disappointing mediocre, I need a game that story is so stupid and so in your face bad in a way that you just can't skip it, that it ruins the enjoyment of an otherwise halfway decent game. Something that really gives me something to piss and whine about. Why, hello!